this. They call them Visco girls now. They're back in style. But next slide. Okay, so bad thing number one that happened right at the new millennium is this thing called the Patriot Act, which at the time everyone was throwing a fit about if you're in conspiracy circles, but I think most people don't really, it's not on their radar. But one of the things that the Patriot Act introduced is something that we have to deal with all the time if we're in crypto. And that is KYC AML, okay? Which if you're a normal person, you have no idea what that stands for. But everyone in crypto knows exactly what that is. That's know your customer laws and anti-money laundering laws. Okay, back in the good old day, you used to be able to go into a bank with $10,000 and say, hi, I want to open a bank account. My name is Billy Johnson, okay? And you can deposit money. There was not a big issue with that. Banks could have individual policies, but ultimately you had a lot of privacy even in the legacy financial system, okay? That was no longer the case after the Patriot Act, okay? This is, again, something that we're dealing with all the time now. So next slide. So number two is this odious device. Oh, I don't have my cell phone. I don't know where my cell phone is. I wanted to use around 2007, I think, is when the iPhone came out, and you have the normalization of personal cellular devices and things like that. The difference between cell phones and everything else is a computer really just knows what you type into it. One thing that I see all the time that people do is if they're worried about privacy, I actually find this very cute, okay? It's a little quaint. I mean, I don't disagree with it, but a lot of people will take their laptop webcam and they'll like put a piece of tape on it, okay? Because they're worried the government is spying on them, right? Now I say it's cute. I don't look down on people who do that. That might be a smart thing to do. But it's a little weird people don't do that with cell phones, because your cell phone has cameras all over it. It has a microphone it can always run. It has GPS location. It connects to the internet. It connects to LTE. Okay, it's connected to everything. It can consume any kind of media that you're producing. And worst of all, it's actually running proprietary software that ultimately that you have no control over. You have no idea what it's saying or doing, okay? So that is something that's been normalized. And around the Bush administration, beginning of the Obama administration, you have the origin of warrantless wiretaps, okay? So what the government decided, it used to be, whenever you have this technology, you used to be able to exploit it if you're the government, but there were legal issues with that. But the government passed laws, FISA and things like that, where they can warrantless I don't know why that's messing me up. Warrantlessly wiretap pretty much anyone they want whenever, okay? And of course that is a disaster when it comes to cell phones, because that means, actually there's a video I want to show you. Let me have that computer, sorry. I totally forgot about this. Okay. So I'm gonna show you a brief little video, which I think is, contact tracing. Okay, so this is a little visualization. You might not be able to see it very well. It's actually making sound, but I'll explain what's happening. This is a private company that, these little dots, these are cell phones. Okay, this is a private company that can zoom in and look at where your cell phone is. Not just your cell phone, but everyone's. What they're doing is they're zooming into, I think, Fort Lauderdale. You can imagine this as being Miami Beach right now. They could zoom into us right now, and you'll see that all these, you can't really see it in the darkness, but you get the idea, right? There are a bunch of little dots, okay? And you can zoom, and what he's gonna do is he's gonna highlight, what they could do now is they can highlight Monerotopia, and they could link on to all of those different cell phones, and then what they're gonna do right here, he's gonna zoom out. I'll forward, because I do presentations fast, so you can zoom out, and then watch. So this is Florida, and there are a bunch of little orange dots here, and what that is this system can watch where all of the cell phones go using metadata. Okay, so you can highlight Monerotopia, you can highlight your cell phones, like your geographic area, and then you can generalize that and watch where people go, okay? So this is what we're talking about. I don't know, until people like see it, it doesn't really make sense. Okay, next slide. Oh yeah, and the worst part about, and then of course, you had the Snowden leaks, which revealed many terrible things about a government, like the fact that they have really ugly slides like this. I don't know, like this is not the dystopian government that I want to be afraid. Like I want the government to look scary, but this just looks like ridiculous. But nonetheless, you have to remember after the warrantless wiretapping laws and things like this, everyone was like, oh, dude, the government doesn't care about you. They're not going to spy on you. Like, it's not a big deal. Don't be a conspiracy theorist. That's been debunked, okay? But of course, the sudden revelations revealed that this is happening all the time, okay? They are actually, believe it or not, the government is actually using the dangerous precedents they're setting, okay? This is something that's just happening, all right? Next slide. Bad thing number 3 is information control. And I say that in a very general sense. Like, this is something that really has accelerated in the past, like 5, 6, 7 years. And when I say information control, I mean mass bannings, I mean curation of content and things like this. Okay, the internet used to be really wild. Okay, anyone who saw YouTube 10 years ago, it is nothing like YouTube is now. YouTube is very much curated. Many people have been banned. Banning is the thing that you see that happens. But actually, go to the next slide. But actually, even worse than banning. Again, you see banning, but what you don't see is that YouTube is tacitly, it favors videos that they want, it puts down videos that they don't want, and this actually happens at a granulated level, okay? I have a YouTube channel, and I can see this happening on my side of it, because you will see certain comments that are, saying some edgy things. It will become, YouTube can make comments unlikable, or they can remove likes from comments. Okay, this is a very standard operating procedure, not just on YouTube, but definitely the worst sites are Reddit and Twitter for this. But when you're looking at sites like this, the idea is not just to tell people what to believe. The idea is to give them this false impression that what they want you to believe is actually what everyone else believes. Like it's this, I've described it as kind of a Skinner's box. It's a way of convincing people, programming them to a particular opinion. Okay, so this is something worrisome as well. Go to the next slide. And I think this is the lastly bad thing. I'm going through a bunch of bad things. I'm convincing you that we live in a kind of dystopia, right? In order to say Monero is necessary for a dystopia, but there are going to be good things coming soon, right? We got to get to the bad things. Bad thing is up. So the bad thing is this has now become very, very real in our time, especially after the coronavirus thing. I don't know if any of you guys remember that. But now we're at a point where the government is now just telling us, no, we actually want to trace your contacts. That's necessary for public health. Actually, yeah, go to the next slide, why not? You can just skip through things. And this is becoming it's very directed. It's not really hidden anymore. This is just, if you refuse to accept it, you're some kind of conspiracy theorist or loony or something like that, right? What is most worrisome is not that the government is doing this stuff. That's basically second most worrisome. But it's an even bigger issue that they are saying it as if you disagree, you're some kind of crazy person, right? If you want to be viewed by mainstream society as an extremist, here's how you do it. Just stand still. Just don't change your opinion in concert with them. If you want to, back as someone who holds the views they used to hold in the 90s about privacy is going to be viewed as kind of a conspiracy theorist now. Okay, let me go to the next slide. This is my favorite. This is one of my favorite memes. Oh, it's not showing up. It's like, we shouldn't call them conspiracy theories. We should call them spoiler alerts. All right, next slide. Okay, so now we've reached rock bottom. Okay, we've talked about all the bad things that are going on. We do live in a dystopia. Dystopia doesn't mean the government's coming out and shooting all of us. That's not what a dystopia is. It's always going to be a place where they are more and more encroaching on our liberties and our freedoms, right? And I think our first speaker, of course, spoke about Cuba. And a lot of people have this idea that, oh, well, the United States is just totally different from countries like that, quote unquote, oppressive regimes. But one of the things that separates Cuba or North Korea or things like that is because Cuba and North Korea, they have to resort to authoritarian measures because they don't have any other option, right? And our government is increasingly feeling, but back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, they weren't that worried about things. They're very worried about things now. So we're at rock bottom. Next slide. I don't know what the next slide is. Oh, yeah, and want to see the future? Let's see the future. Next slide. Please delete all tweets that violate your bank's hate speech policies to process payment. Okay, next slide. This one's not even visible. It's like, it's a Babylon Bee article that's like, Ukrainian support is now required for access to restaurants. Next slide. Next slide. This is my classic Facebook favorite. We're sorry, your Amazon smart refrigerator has denied you access to your groceries due to a homophobic comment made at dinner last night. So you might say, oh, that sounds totally crazy. Like they can't do that. But the thing is they can, next slide. The thing is they can do that. We have given the government and corporations the ability to do these things for us. And they have you might disagree with it or not, but they have every ability to do them, and they even have some motive to do it. So why aren't they going to? When you're dealing with a society, you can't. Cryptocurrency is all about trust, right? We do not want to have to trust alternative parties. We want to be able to do what we want without having the consent of someone who most of the times we might say, oh, okay, well, maybe the government in general is going to be good. It's going to be good people, right? I forget what I was going to say with this meme, but whatever. Go to the next one. So let's talk about the good things. So now we're at rock bottom, but how do we come up? Now, the first thing that was good that happened in the 80s and the 90s was the free software movement. Okay, so the free software movement is very simple to, so software, for those who don't know, it is written in source code. And if you know the source code, you can look at it, you can see what it's doing, and of course you can change it, you can edit it, and you can distribute it. Okay, but one thing that happened earlier on is that a lot of companies, they took source code, they compiled binaries from that, which you cannot necessarily read, and they would distribute software from there. So the free software movement is an attempt basically to make sure that all software we run is, we can look at the code, we see what it's doing, we see that it's not violating privacy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So the free software movement, which again, next slide. So the free software movement is actually started by this guy, Richard Stallman. Okay, he's a very attractive guy. And we have made so significant improvements in this area. Back in the 1990s, you basically had to use closed source proprietary software for everything. And that means if you're using closed source software, that you have no idea what it's actually doing. It tells you notionally what it's supposed to be doing, but you have no way of validating if it's making connections to other, some server, it's pinging your information or anything else. You have no way of validating that whatsoever. So nowadays, however, you can run all free software on your computer. It's actually very easy. Of course, Stallman started the FSF, the Free Software Foundation, and the GNU project, which of course became GNU Linux. And of course, you can install a Linux distribution on your phone, your phone, or on your computer, or use BSD, and you can run entirely free and open source software without having any worries of using programs that are not respecting your privacy. I've used nothing but free and open source software for the past 6-7 years or something like that. It's not as difficult as people make it out to be. And everyone does everything in a browser now anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And Richard Stallman, he actually has a little pin here. It says, what did it say? Don't be tracked, use cache. Right, that's good advice. Although I don't like, so that's his famous burgundy shirt. It actually doesn't look very good on him. So actually, next slide. So this is what he looks like without it, okay? And you can look like this too if you use free software. All right, next slide. Important note. Okay, this is gonna be a little awkward, but if I don't do it, no one else is gonna do it. I need to chide people in the room. And I'm not chiding anyone in particular, I'm chiding everyone. Okay, yeah, I am chiding you, whoever you are. So I'm chiding everyone just in general, and I will say, listen, we can make fun of people who use custodial wallets for Monero or Bitcoin or something like that, and that makes total sense because they're using it in the wrong way. But you really have no right to judge if you are using proprietary software. If you are using Monero, yes, thank you. Actually, more people should clap because I know that one was forced. But if you have a Monero wallet, you might think you're an elite hacker, but it means nothing if it's on Windows. I hate to say it, Windows is an entirely compromised operating system. If you knew how bad it was, I would consider any seed phrase that has touched Windows as being compromised, and I would switch over to GNU Linux right now and move your funds to a wallet like that. I hate to tell it, but that's how it is. And this, mind you, applies to proprietary software. This applies to Google, using Google Drives and stuff like that. And one thing that's very unfortunate in the cryptocurrency sphere is I see a lot of people using like cloud services, proprietary services, when you just don't have to. Okay, so that's my chiding. If I don't do it, someone else, I'm the person who's supposed to chide people on this, and it's awkward, but it's true. Okay, next. Okay, good thing number 2, the normalization of encrypt. Okay, so I will go over this kind of quickly, but back in the 90s, made a connection to a website that was easily prey to a man-in-the-middle attack. Okay, someone could basically monitor what you're doing. Thankfully, that is no longer the case. Now, your ISP and other people can see when you connect to a website, but that connection is encrypted. So only you and the website can actually see what you're transferring. So your website, it might see what site you're visiting, but it doesn't necessarily see the content that is traveling on that. So that is a massive improvement. Partially, I mean, this started back in the 90s, but this is something that accelerated, especially with the Snowden revelations, right? So even big companies, even Google is like, well, this is totally screwed up. Okay, the government, if we're going to give the government information, we're going to choose to give it to them. Okay, and they will happily do that, but they don't want the government snooping on other things. So one thing that's very nice is basically every website you use nowadays is going to be over HTTPS. And this isn't just about HTTPS and HTTP. This is, you know, there are chat protocols. I mean, I use XMPP or Matrix that are infinitely better than Telegram in terms of, you know, Telegram, in case you don't know, I know everyone uses it nowadays. But Telegram, of course, is a proprietary system. The open source app on your phone might be open source, but it's connecting to a proprietary system that can decrypt your messages, okay? There are pre-existing software like XMPP or Matrix. You can totally avoid that. It's not a problem, okay? So the thing, what I'm trying to say is alternatives exist, okay? Next slide. But here's the problem. If you can have all these encrypted connections over the internet, if you can't transact value, that's kind of a problem, right? Like exchange monetary value. And that, of course, is, actually, go to the next slide, why not? Okay, yeah, so that's where Bitcoin comes in. All right, so if you want to give someone money via PayPal, right, it looks very simple. I'm just sending money via PayPal, but what you're actually doing is you are using 5,000 different systems, proprietary systems, that are all privacy nightmares. You are using a credit card to pay on PayPal, a credit card that's run by Visa or something like that that's connected to a bank. And then you pay to PayPal, and then PayPal pays out to someone else that's connected to their bank. There are like 5,000 intermediaries. Any of those people can shut you down. Any of those people can monitor you. And of course, we all know, you know, the Bitcoin monitoring situation. But at least at the beginning, the idea behind Bitcoin is let's cut out all of the intermediaries. And the invention of Bitcoin is, of course, the idea of decentralized consensus, Nakamoto consensus, you know, proof of work, things like this, right? So that is the big innovation. We can actually have free software for money as well. That is what Bitcoin is. So it's not digital gold. It's not even, you know, I can make money. I think we all in this room at least know that. That's what Bitcoin was founded for. All right, next slide. And yeah, most of Bitcoin was good. There was no approval required. It was free software money, and it was also sound money. I'm actually omitting the whole sound money angle. I have a lot to say about that. I don't have a lot of time, so I will not talk about that. But Bitcoin was a massive improvement. Next slide. But here's another one of my favorite cartoons. It's two people on a wall. It says, "Don't know. That's how Satoshi left it." And that's how Bitcoin is. It's an unfinished project, right? It have next slide actually. It's a privacy nightmare. Meaning all transactions are of course public information. All of the content of wallets are public information. Everyone knows this. I can skip the slide, but I'll read the text anyway. It has huge metadata issues. You leak your IP all over the place. Your IP isn't on the blockchain, but miners can see it very easily. And it also reuses addresses, obviously. It's unscalable. And people will say a lot of cryptocurrencies aren't scalable yet, but the thing is Bitcoin has built into it a block size limit that requires you to use some layer 2 because Bitcoin cannot transact over 1 megabyte every 10 minutes. And it also really has harder entry due to competitive mining. Next slide. So the good thing number 4 is Monero. I mean, you know where this was going. Next slide. And again, we can so Monero uses ring signatures for transaction privacy. I'm very glad that I did not have to be the first presenter to say that ring signatures are not at least a little suboptimal. I too am a big proponent of zero knowledge proofs being used for that, but that's an aside. I didn't want to like, you know, that's an awkward talk at a Monero thing, but you know, that's my personal opinion. But I'm a dilettante, don't trust me. You have stealth addresses and Dandelion++. Dandelion++ is obfuscating your IP address, hiding it from who is mining you, and stealth addresses, of course, so you don't know who has how much money or anything. And of course, there's, what's it called? The word that I just forgot starts with B, bulletproofs, yeah. Variable block size for emission and scalability, and of course, ASIC resistance. Again, just go to the next slide. We all know this. So you've probably seen this meme, but this is very true. If you want to use privacy, if you want privacy with Monero, what you have to do is use Monero. That's it. All right, go home. If you want privacy with Bitcoin, you have to get Bitcoin from a non-KYC peer-to-peer exchange. You use CoinJoin, use Tor, use the Lightning Network, and thankfully we have Schnorr signatures and Taproot, which I don't know why people talk about those all the time as if they're a big privacy gain. I mean, they're a very minor privacy gain, but that's fine. So this is now the environment we're in. Next slide. Oh yeah, this is the same thing repeated in a Twitter argument where someone says, privacy isn't illegal, use Bitcoin privately by running Wasabi wallet, using CoinJoin, using a hardware wallet, bonus points if you use Tor and use Lightning Network with CoinJoin outputs, to which this person just responds, just use Monero. And of course, if you follow this first poster's advice, that would be very, very bad advice now, because we now know that the Wasabi wallet had big privacy issues in it. And as those that hacking couple, what was it, the Bitfinex hack, was that it? They found that out the hard way. So anyway, next slide. So here's a father and his son. He's teaching his son how to ride a bike. And that's how I feel when I'm inducting people into cryptocurrency, right? Now the thing is, when you let someone go with Monero, you know that they're on a good bike. They're going to be stable. It's all going to be okay. They're not going to screw anything up if they have good non-KYC, good off, or at least off-exchange Monero, right? That is not the case with Bitcoin. Like if you let someone go, oh yeah, I taught you how to use Bitcoin. Well, now you just know they're going to screw something up. Okay, they're going to be paying all of these transaction fees. That's just like the most superficial thing, but everything they do is going to be monitored, and you have to jump through the hoops that we did in the slide before in order for it to just do the bare minimum of what you want in currency to do. I just as a note, I think I don't want to say I don't like, that sounds it sounds like I'm starting drama, but I kind of don't like it when people call Monero a privacy coin, right? Because it's really just a coin. Like it really does what a currency is supposed to do, and I think we should kind of take back that language. Some people call Bitcoin a surveillance coin, and I think that it's better to look at Bitcoin and public blockchains that don't attempt to hide transactions as being the odd thing out. Because even when you use Visa and MasterCard, when you use cash, even if you're using PayPal and all this stuff, at least you are not broadcasting everything you do onto some site on the internet, okay? It's crazy, but that's how Bitcoin works. Next slide. So if Bitcoin can't be used for currency, what's it good for? Valid question. I actually don't know what the next slide is, but let's go find out. There have been very many copes when it comes to the usage of Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is, we don't really do that cash thing anymore. We're now digital gold. And even worse than that, there's this. This is now, I anonymize this because I don't want to put the person who said it on I don't know, make this person feel bad. But this is not just a tweet, it's a pinned tweet. So they're serious about it. Many think swiping their card instantly transfers money from their account to the merchants. In reality, that's data being transferred on the second layer. Base layer settlements can take weeks. Bitcoin isn't replacing your card. It's replacing base layer settlement central banks. Okay, so that's what Bitcoin has become. Listen, you're still gonna have your card, you're still gonna have your Visa and MasterCard, you can still use that. You're gonna have the same currency system, just for some reason, banks are just gonna switch to this hard currency that they can't get free stuff of from the government. It's silly. Next slide. This is too much reading, but it's some other guy saying the same thing. Oh, actually, I'll read it out because it's awkward if I don't, right? You're still going to use that same card you have anonymized. I'm not telling you who this is. This is a famous person. You're still going to use that same card you have in your wallet, but now you can choose to spend your dollars at Bitcoin. MasterCard will say, hey, you can still use that exact same point of sale system. You can still use that exact same card network, but now we're going to support other assets. Next slide. We don't ask people to change their behavior, but instead, what we do is start to integrate these technologies and assets into what they're already doing and may or may not even be aware that there's a technology upgrade underway and that there are other assets available to them, okay? So that is very silly because, next slide. Because the Bitcoin revolution will not be televised because it won't make a difference, okay? What a lot of Bitcoin maximalists, they're more or less supposing is that we're gonna get to a point where we're all the system is gonna be running on Bitcoin. Next slide. We're gonna have the same spyware, we're gonna have the same KYC, same regulation, we're gonna have more monitoring because you have the Bitcoin blockchain that's publicly viewable, but it's Bitcoin, so it's cool, okay? That's the problem. That I think is the biggest issue with Bitcoin right now. It's people who don't really care about they don't care about the whole point of why this system was developed. They care, I love the brand of Bitcoin. It's just so cool, I'm a Bitcoiner, right? Next. Why did I put this here? Oh yeah, I was going to say something like, so all these people are saying that all these credit card companies are going to use Bitcoin, and the question I have is, why? Because, next slide, what Bitcoin is supposed to do, what Monero is supposed to do, is have a peer-to-peer decentralized system for transacting value without intermediaries. Because if Bitcoin were trying to just process payments and didn't care about centralization, it really sucks at that. All cryptocurrencies suck at that. We haven't solved the problem of scaling. Bitcoin has a 10 transaction per second maximum over 10 minutes, or over 1 second, yeah, TPS, 10 transactions per second. Okay, that is the absolute maximum. Whereas Visa, if Bitcoin wants to be, the next payment processor, Visa on average transacts 1,700 transactions every second. Okay, that's just not possible on the Bitcoin blockchain. So any of these people saying, oh my goodness, they're going to use this better software, no, they're not going to. I mean, maybe they will, because they want to basically index fund based on the price of Bitcoin, but they're not going to use it because it's better for what they're doing, okay? And yeah, that's not why Bitcoin exists. Next slide. So can all these features be added onto the unchangeable Bitcoin software? Next slide. So the common answer is, well, Bitcoin, we can do things in Bitcoin, but we're going to build software on top of Bitcoin. So you have the Lightning Network is the most common thing, which of course, the Lightning Network is not necessarily tied to Bitcoin. It can be used on Litecoin. Theoretically, it can be used on other, it's software. It's software that is not necessarily tied to Bitcoin in itself. A lot of people say, oh, the Lightning Network is Bitcoin. It really is not the case. But the thing about layer 2 that you have to keep in mind is for it to maintain that decentralized, perfection, you have to still be free and open source. You can't just build proprietary crap that's monitoring people on top of it. It still has to be decentralized. One of the big issues with the Lightning Network is the game theoretics of it are that it encourages people to centralize in hubs. Like that is more beneficial. You can process things more efficiently. So what happens is you have traditional banks, they can just create their own hubs, they can monitor all the transactions, and you just have a repeat of Visa and MasterCard and things like that. And of course, it has to have no KYC. I want to say Doug did an interview with one of the Lightning Network developers and actually talks about this. The Lightning Network, again, I actually fully expect the Lightning Network will do better and better and it will become more usable. Okay, I'm not saying, oh, it's a bunch of nonsense. But it's dealing with problems in the same way that solving problems on the base layer would be problems, right? So one of them is, the thing that the guy that Doug interviewed said was that, one big issue is the Lightning Network. You can tie up liquidity. You can have a denial of service attack on the Lightning Network. This is a big vulnerability now. You can tie up a bunch of Bitcoin and basically prevent people from doing transactions. Okay, and there's stuff like it's real. We're really rediscovering the wheel when we build these layer 2 solutions. Next slide. So the worst case scenario of Bitcoin is a Bitcoin app that requires KYC. The app is closed source. You can't actually see what it's doing. It could be monitoring everything and sending it to who knows who. A custodial wallet and the government or some other party controls the money. Transactions are monitored. Transactions limited to certain parties. That is, they can say, oh, here's our Lightning node. We don't make connections to these people. And some company under US jurisdiction has custodianship. Okay, that's the worst case scenario. I don't like that term. That sounds pessimistic. Worst case scenario. Next slide. So what I prefer to call it is the El Salvador scenario, because that's basically what's happening slowly in El Salvador. Now, to be totally clear, I 100% support the idea of accepting Bitcoin as legal. I think it's a great thing that this has happened in El Salvador, but this is the state. For most people using Bitcoin in El Salvador, this is how it is. The government has an app called Chivo that is, the first thing you do when you install that thing, you have got to scan your face and your government ID, okay? It is not a you don't have custodianship over that money, okay? That is something that the government theoretically has custodianship of, but it's actually even worse because there's really an American company, I forget what it is, maybe it's like Bitco or something like that. There's actually an American company that does custodianship that has the custodianship rights to all of the Bitcoin in El Salvador being used on the system, which is just insane. So you have this party under the thumb of the American government. So that is exactly, I think, the worst thing that could happen. And unless you do something, unless you're building principally good tools, this is inevitable. It's the path of least resistance. Okay, next. I forget what my last slides are. I will just say, so there is also an issue the previous speaker actually spoke about the Unix philosophy, which I'm a big fan of in computing. But I will say this, I'm not a big fan of the Unix philosophy in money. Okay, so a lot of the thing that Bitcoin users will say is, they'll say things like, well, Bitcoin, it secures, it's digital scarcity, and we can build the transaction stuff on top of that. And I find that problematic because what happens in real life, if, for example, Bitcoin is accepted by Visa and MasterCard and all of these different parties that are beholden to the government in some way or the other, what you can do if you have this multiple layer solution is you can say, okay, hard fork everyone. The government is now saying that if you want to transact in America, you have to use Bitcoin Plus. This is our special version of Bitcoin. And you still have your funds, you have everything, but they're just some little, founders rewards for the USG. We can do things like that. And that's a big problem. The thing about Monero is it preserves the peer-to-peer nature that cryptocurrency is supposed to be. You don't need extra layers on top of it. Go to the next slide. I don't know what it is. We can just skip this. Go ahead. So my point is, the thing about Monero is that it works now. Like in the analogy of sending off a kid to ride a bike, okay? I can confidently say, if you want to transact digitally, use Monero to someone, and I don't have to worry about that. I do have to worry about that in the case of Bitcoin. That's the big issue. And yes, there are many problems that Monero will face. I don't think that any cryptocurrency right now can scale to a global level. There are many things that we could, again, on the ring signature issue, I think that it would be much better to use ZK snarks or something, so long as it's trustless. There are many things like that that I think Monero can be improved in, but the important thing about the Monero development team is that Monero is a product for right now that works, and I wouldn't say you can trust them, because that's very anti-cryptocurrency, but there is a sense in which we, as Monero people, we are almost like the only people in the cryptocurrency sphere who are actually serious about this kind of stuff, which is very sad, considering how big and how much money is in this. Next slide. Oh yeah, and if you actually went back in time, and if Bitcoin and Monero both existed in 2009, what kind of weirdo would ever pick Bitcoin? Okay, if you had the choice, if the market caps were equal, there's no choice that Monero would be the preferred. Next slide. Last slide. Sorry. So last advice, number one, minimize all tech usage. Okay, that should be. I didn't even talk about that, but that's something you should, because metadata, even if you're using free software, is leaking all over the place. And a lot of people they think they're really cool for using all this fancy technology. I think I said in a video the other day, I stole this very nice line from Eli, the computer guy. The internet is like, trying to encrypt on the internet is like trying to encrypt yodeling, okay? Yodeling is loud and everyone can hear it. In the same way, internet connections, they're just all over the place. You spill metadata all over. Answer number one is actually just not using the internet for things that you're worried about, okay? But for everything else, use all free software, please. I want to see no one on Windows next year. That is probably more important than, I don't want to say more important, but I think it's more foundational. And never be unencrypted, okay? And use Monero to transact. I assume you're doing all this, but all right, that's it.
Awesome, man, awesome. Let me just ask like one or two questions.
Sure.
But we really don't have much time at all.
Sorry about that.
No worries at all, man. That was great. So you mentioned, it was 2009. You'd be a fool to choose Bitcoin over Monero, but it's not 2009. Bitcoin came out first. It has the first mover advantage.
Yep.
Some in Bitcoin would say because of that, everything else is going to trend to zero against Bitcoin. Bitcoin is going to eat the entire world. So sorry, too bad. We don't have privacy in the protocol level, but Bitcoin is good enough. Yeah. What is your response to that?
I mean, a point of comparison, right? People often talk about like VHS and Betamax because VHS was first to the scene. I don't know, maybe Zoomers don't even know what this stuff is, but tapes, videotapes. So VHS was first on the scene, and then Betamax came out like a year or two later, and it was better technology, and it just never caught on because that 1 year made all the difference. So the difference between Bitcoin and Monero is that both VHS and Betamax did the bare minimum. They functioned as currencies. Bitcoin, in order for it to function as a currency, you have to jump through a lot of hoops, okay, to use it correctly. So that's where Monero's big advantage, I think, comes from. You can use it for this. You can use it for what it's supposed to, whereas Bitcoin, I mean, the people in Bitcoin, they're effectively speculators. And everyone, and even in Monero, that's true in some part.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So we'll leave it at that. I wish we had time, but I could obviously ask you questions all day. It's what I do on Monero Talk.
Okay.
But we're gonna move it along.